As I've been doing with all of my webinars, I do have the notes for today's session available in the Peacock Studio store on the website. It's just $5, and it gives you the notes that I'm using to do the seminar with, as well as the images and textures that I use. So when you watch the replay, which will be on my YouTube channel by tomorrow, you can follow along and do the projects if you like. And that definitely helps me continue to be able to do these because Zoom does charge for the webinar function. So I appreciate your support. And I do have some specials for you at the end of the webinar. I have a new texture set I just released today that's half price. And then I'm going to do a special 30% on textures until Sunday for everything else in the store. Alrighty, so enough chit chat. I'm going to close this. Oh, we just had somebody sign in from Mexico. We're at almost 300 people. We had over 500 sign up. So thanks again. I really, really appreciate it. Alrighty, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you how you can take two textures and make a new texture out of it. So people often ask, how am I getting my images onto the screen? Because you don't see me going up to the file open command. I do have two monitors, so I have everything all set up in an order in a folder on my other screen, so I'm just opening everything from there. Sometimes I will drag them in, and sometimes, like now, I'm just double clicking and opening the file. So for this first one, this is actually something that I pulled from my second ebook on working with textures, which is also on the website. And it's something we don't often think about doing. I know I sometimes don't think about combining the actual textures. I will often use multiple textures in a project. But we're going to take these two textures. This is blue rust, and as I was sitting here looking at this, I'm like, oh, this looks like a little piggy or something. It's very cute. This was on an old car, one of the places we photographed, and this one is some concrete that has some moss growing on it. So we're going to combine these two, and the way we're going to do that is I'm going to be using the Move tool. And we have our two images open here, up here at the top. And if you are an Elements user, you can do this same process, but you would be dragging, rather than the tabs at the top, you'll be dragging from your photo bin at the bottom. All of these projects too can also be done in any program that can do layers. So if you use On1, if you use Luminar, which we're going to touch on later, there's a few others, Affinity, anything that can do layers, you can do all of these things with. So I'm going to grab this tab for the blue rust, and I'm going to pull it down and just pull it over a little. And when I let go, I'll be able to see both images next to each other. And I'm going to use that Move tool. I'm going to click anywhere in this texture, the blue texture, and I'm going to click, hold, and drag my mouse over the concrete texture. So now I can close this one, and now we see both images are in the same file. So where I'm going to move this one into position, and they happen to be the same size, so I didn't need to stretch them, but if I did, you would just want to make sure the one covers the other. So just like when we're working with textures in our actual projects, the key to making things blend together is our blending modes and opacity. So for this one, I'm going to change this blue texture to soft light. And I'm going to reduce the opacity to about 75%. And so you can see we went from that texture to that texture. Just give it a little more depth, a little more color. It's a little bit darker. Just gives you a different look. Now, the other thing you can do, and this is something, again, I don't always think about doing some of these things, but it's kind of like, yeah, that comes out pretty cool. We can invert the colors of this texture to totally create something different. So I'm going to flatten this one because I already have it saved. So I'm just going to go layer flatten. I always save things first as a TIFF file so I keep my layers. And then I'm going to go up here under my adjustment layers, and you can either do it through the adjustment panel, or if you go under layer, I never do it up here, image, adjustments, and then do invert. And it completely changes the color palette of that image just by doing the inversion. So this gives you another way you can take textures and create basically a library of textures out of this. You could also add a hue and saturation adjustment and change it even further. So I'm going to save this one as a JPEG because we're going to use this in our project. So I just do save as, and I'm going to go into the file that I'm working with, and I'm just going to put blended texture. And I usually save it at 10. I don't usually need it to be that big a file and save it at the 12. So then we're going to close that. And then we're going to start our project, and then we're going to bring that back in a moment to work with our next project. So I'm going to show you how this file first started. I'm going to open up my original TIFF image. This was taken at Mohonk Mountain House, which is in New Paltz, New York. A beautiful hotel that sits way up on top of the mountain. It's like, I think prices start at like $400 and something a night. So I definitely did not stay there. But our Connecticut Association of Photographers had done a couple of trips up there. And I think it was like $25 to normally get on the grounds. But if you had the Sunday buffet, then they waived that fee because it was definitely worth, you know, going just to see the garden. Somebody just asked the question, why did I flatten that layer, the image previously, before I did the inversion? Because I wanted to invert both layers together and not just the top layer. So I just did it that way so it would invert the whole image for me. Alrighty, so this was what I started with, and this is not actually rain. They had a sprinkler going, so that's why it has all these drops. My camera sensor may be dirty, but it's not quite that dirty. I think that might have been a raindrop too, or drop from the sprinkler. So what I did with this one, and I'm gonna bring in the other one I already did this to, was I selected this background using the magic wand and deleted the background, and I just wanted the silhouette of this flower. I thought it was just a really interesting shape. So let me close this one and open up the one I've already done that to for time's sake. So this is now the silhouette by itself with no background around it. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is open back up that texture we just created. So let's go File and Open. And we're going to go to our blended texture. And I'm going to rotate this because it's a little bit more of a vertical than a horizontal image. So before I bring this in, I'm just going to go Edit. And let's go this way, Image, Rotation, 90 degrees. And then I'm going to use my Move tool, and I'm going to do that same thing and separate this out and drag the texture on over in. Nope, we don't need to save that because it's rotated. So you can see this texture is much bigger than the image. So I'm just going to bring this down to the size of my flower image. And we'll say OK. Now I actually want this texture behind the flower. So I could have actually dragged the flower onto the texture, but I didn't want to stretch the flower to fill the size of the texture. So that's why I did it this way. So we're going to bring that down to the back. Now, don't worry, this doesn't look good yet, but we've got a lot more we're going to do to this one. So let's see, let me actually read the notes here. Those steps everybody's asking. Okay, people want me to repeat those steps. So let me do that part again. So let's get rid of this layer for a second. Dave said I'm getting so what I did here was in the original image, I'll open that for a second. To get the transparent background, I used the magic wand and I just started selecting the background and then hold the shift key and select more, and then just deleted it to hit the lock button. I usually put a blank layer underneath, and then on here I would just hit delete. and Control D, and that would be your image. And then I just erased out all the rest of this stuff so that I just had my flower. So that would be how we got the transparent one. And then I flopped it so it was angled leaning the other direction like that. I just did a edit transform and flip horizontal to get it to move in that direction. This is all in the notes as well. So if you do want to practice this and do it along with me later, you can grab the notes later on. They're actually already in the store. All right, so let's see. What program am I in? I am in Photoshop, CC, the latest version of CC. Let's see. All right, so let's do that again. So we're going to bring our texture back in. And I just drug it in this time. So it already came right into this image, so I didn't have to do a separate step. And then I'm going to now rotate it. So I'm going to do Control T to get my handles back, and I can just rotate it as such. And I'm holding down the Shift key so I can unconstrain my proportions. And I also want to lighten this texture. So what I'll do a lot of times, especially when I have something that's transparent, is I'm going to add a layer at the bottom, and I'm going to fill that layer with white. So if I wanted to lower this opacity, it has something behind it. Otherwise, it would just become more transparent, which wouldn't be very attractive. So I'm going to flip my foreground color to white, and I use the keyboard shortcut to fill the layer of Alt backspace on a Mac. That is Option Delete, and that automatically fills the layer with a white. So now I'm going to go up here. Let me get back to my notes. Okay, so we're going to reduce the opacity later on. So I'm going to add a drop shadow to my flower to give it a little more width and body. And the way we're going to, let me turn off this layer for a minute so you can see the drop shadow better. So I'm going to just double click somewhere in this blank area of the layer, and that will open up the layer styles panel. And I'm going to click on drop shadow. And once you select one of these functions, you have to make sure you click that layer, that line, so that you get the proper controls here in the middle. I'm going to, I like the light typically coming from the upper left, so I usually use 135. I'm going to use the color that, actually I want that gray, so that's fine, 999999. We want a middle gray. The opacity at 74. Distance, I think it's remembering what I did the other day when I was trying out this project, so actually those settings are what I want. So we're going to say okay. And you can see it's really slight, but I like drop shadows with images I've placed on top of a background, because I think it just gives a little bit of separation instead of it looking like it was like cut out and pasted on something. Okay, so I've got my texture and I've got this. I'm actually going to create a black and white layer of both of these. So I want that to apply to both. So I like to work with merged layers. So I don't want to flatten it at this point because I want to keep these layers. So I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut, Control, Alt, Shift, and the letter E. And I'll repeat that again. On a Mac, that would be Command, Option, Shift, E. And that will give you this merge layer. So that layer contains those two items. So I always rename it merge just so I remember what it is that I did there. Then I'm going to add a black and white adjustment layer. So now we have a black and white function. I'm going to change the blue slider to 86 or so, around there. And I'm going to lower the opacity of this layer just a little bit to let a hint of the color show through. Okay. And now I'm going to highlight the merged layer and the black and white, and I'm going to merge those two layers. Control, Alt, Shift, E. Alrighty. Now I want to do, I'm going to duplicate this merged layer, Control or Command J, and I'm going to change the blending mode of this second layer to multiply, to darken this a little bit, and lower the opacity. And you know what? I'm looking at this now going, I used the wrong texture in here. I used the inverted one, and I should have used the one that wasn't inverted. Shame on me. So this does not have quite the look that I want, but I'll show you the finished one in a second. The steps are the same, except that I used the wrong texture. Okay, so next I want to, so this was a duplicate. So this was our merged layer, and this is a duplicate. I want to add a border in Topaz to give this a little bit of a kind of a vignette. Yeah, can't talk. Vignette look. So I'm going to go my filter, studio, Topaz Studio. And we're going to go into add a filter and texture. And I'm going to choose the group borders just so I don't have to search through everything. And I'm going to use the one called Border Fade 5. I like the borders in here on my projects. I just think they have a really nice look to them. And I'm going to up the opacity of this one. Usually you're lowering it on a border. This one I want a little bit darker, to 80%. And we'll say accept to go back to our Photoshop. And that is our project, but let me show you what it really should have looked like with the correct texture. So I'm opening this one, and that's what it should be. It should have been this bluer texture. So by having the layer a little bit more transparent, the black and white, it let a little bit of that blue show through. So sorry about that. I was demonstrating the inverse and then used the wrong one, but the steps were the same, and then I used the border from Topaz again. So the drop shadow is very subtle, but you can see it's just there a little bit. It just gives a little bit more width and depth to the, I call it spiky silhouette. So that's our first project. So I'm going to close this one and close this one. Definitely shows up better against the other texture. And I'm going to show you just something really easy that you can do to an image to add a little bit of drama. So this is one I took the beginning of June. We were down in the Smokies for a few days, and we were driving through Cades Cove, and I took this from the car. This bird landed on the wire fence and stayed there for quite a while. And I had my 150 to 500 on, and I just opened the car window and started shooting handheld, and got quite a few nice shots of him or her, not sure which it was. So we're going to go ahead and start on this one. I'm going to duplicate my background layer. I'm going to go into my Topaz Studio and do my AI Clear. If you've seen any of my previous webinars and tutorials, you know I am in love with AI Clear. What that is doing is adding detail, clarity, and denoise all at one time. So you can see some background noise here, and just like that, it is gone away. So let's do a side by side, and you can kind of see that. I'll zoom in a little bit. So you can see how noisy this background is here. There's our before, and there's our after. So it really crisped up the details and the feathers, even the fence a little bit, the wire, and it got rid of all that background noise just in one step. If I have a really noisy image, I will use denoise. But for something like this, that's just a little bit of camera noise. AI Clear does a great job with that. Hang on, we got one. Would Topaz Mask AI have been easier to mask the flower previously? You could have done that, but because I wanted to totally get rid of the background and I wanted that transparency is why I just used the magic wand and just selected the background because it was reasonably consistent in color. So that it worked well for that particular one. But again, I always say whatever works for you in your projects, because there is always more than one way to do everything in Photoshop, as we know. So if you're more comfortable using masking instead, that's perfectly fine as well. Alrighty, so back to this guy. So we did our AI Clear. And I did go into Topaz Sharpen and kind of crisp up the bird just a little bit more. So we're going to go into our Topaz and go to Sharpen AI. And I must say, I tried, people are going to say, well, why did you do AI Clear first if you're going to sharpen? I actually tried this both ways, with doing AI Clear first and without it. And I liked it better doing the AI Clear first. I think it did a better job on the bird and didn't give me as many artifacts as it did doing the sharpen first, which you would think would have made more sense. But I did use stabilize as the function. And sometimes you can try the auto to see what it decides it should be the best one. Sometimes I'll just try all three and see which one I like best. I left these on the default, so we'll hit update. And I should have duplicated my layer again in Photoshop. Getting ahead of myself today. All right, so that's definitely a little over sharpened. So I'm going to bring this back a little bit and we'll update it. And sometimes when it's zoomed in here, it looks a little more overly done than it does when you're back to Photoshop. And I'm also going to mask a little bit of this off once we get back. All right, so here is there's the before and there's the after. Definitely brought out a ton of more clarity and sharpness in the eye and the beak. The feathers are a little overdone, but like I said, we're going to mask a little bit of that off. You can do masking here by using the masking function up here. I just prefer to do it in Photoshop. Again, I like keeping everything on my separate layers. And just that's my preferred way to work. But there is, the option of doing that here as well. If you do it here, once you get to Photoshop, you wouldn't be able to go back and change the mask, which is why I like doing it in Photoshop. And it does take just a little bit of time to process this. So let me see if we have any other questions I can answer while we're waiting. Can you still get AI Clear, or is it replaced by AI Sharpen? AI Clear is a filter in Topaz Studio 2. So you can't buy it separately. It never was a separate item, but it's part of Studio. Do I use denoise? Yes, when I need to. If I have something exceptionally noisy, I definitely use denoise. And where is Topaz Studio? Studio is, it's a separate product from Topaz, and when you're in Photoshop, you can access it through your filter menu. It also can be used as a standalone, and you can do full processing in Studio if you choose to do that. So it can be, and you can also access it from Lightroom or whatever other software you use, you can install it into that. So that is something you can add on to your digital toolbox. All right, come on. I always say I need Jeopardy music when I'm waiting for these things. What is the resolution of the images I am using? I generally work at 300 dpi. I always resize and save everything at that, so I have a good quality if I want to make prints and enlargements. So that's my general working space. And you're welcome. All right, come on, 99%. We're almost there. All righty, so here we are. So this has actually the AI clear and the sharpen on here, but I'm going to add a layer mask. And if I zoom in, you can see the feathers are just a little bit overdone. So we can take a soft round brush and not quite that big. And we have black as our foreground color. I lower my opacity usually at about 40 or 50%. And we're just going to mask a little bit of that off so they don't look quite so over crispy. How'd you create the blank checkerboard layer? The checkerboard is the area that became transparent when I deleted the background, so I didn't create that. That's what you see when you have transparency in a layer. Okay, so now we have our bird that looks pretty good. So what I want to do now is I'm going to bring in a texture, and this is one of my grunge border textures. And you can also do this with, these come as both PNGs, and that's a JPEG. That's not really what I want. So I'm going to delete that layer and use the brush. Wow, I'm not with it today. All right, so we're going to add a blank layer. And I'm going to go into my grunge borders. And I'm going to choose the one sketchy frame. Alrighty, so I am going to make my color black. So I'm just going to switch that, and I ended up clicking. So let's flip that. So I'm going to make my brush almost the size of my image. I'm going to line it up in the upper left corner, and I'm going to click just one time and click once. Oops, my opacity is still at 40%. So for brushes, I always like to work at 100%, and then I can lower the opacity later. So let's do that again. That looks like brown instead of black, huh? All right, let's try this one more time. Jeez, now we have black. All right, so I'm going to do Control T to get the handles and stretch this out. Of course, this doesn't look very good yet. I am going to change the blending mode of this to soft light. And you can see what a difference that already makes to this. And I'm going to lower the opacity to about 78% or so. Alrighty. And then I decided I wanted, let's get rid of the brush there, that I want to get rid of all of the texture on the bird and lighten up a little bit of this texture in the center. I want to keep more of it around the edges. So we're going to add a layer mask. Go back to our round brush. Ooh, now it's giant. All right, that's a little better. I'm going to leave it at 100 for now because I do want to take all of it off of the bird. I really don't want the texture on our little birdie. And I'm using the bracket keys to change the size of my brush. It's much quicker than choosing a size, because who knows what size 200 pixels looks like, because it's different on your, depending on the image size as well. All right, so that's pretty good. So we got it off of the bird. Now I'm going to make my brush bigger and lower the opacity. So I just want to take some of it off the background. And the reason that I'm going to make it bigger is so that I don't have to go over the areas too much. So I'm going to just do kind of like that. There, you can see I've gotten it a little bit lighter in the middle, so it's a little more subtle, but we've left some drama around the edge. So it's taken an image, even though it was a nice image, it was kind of, you know, just sitting there in the middle of the frame by itself. So using a little bit of texture on it is a good way to, you know, just kind of finish it off. Alrighty, let's move on. We've got lots to cover yet. So this next one, I'm going to use some Nik products on. So let me open up my next one. And this was a just a grassy thing. This was from Magnolia Gardens a few years ago when we were down south. The first thing I wanted to do here is use my healing brush and get rid of this odd stick over here. And of course it's going to be difficult, but that will work for now. And I'm also going to flip this because I want it to lean. The way that your eye flows is generally left to right. So I'm going to go image, edit, rotation, flip horizontal. All right, so there we are. All right, so we did that. Now I'm going to duplicate my background layer. And I do want to crop this a little bit. So I'm going to get rid of some of this extra background. Oh, that's why. I'm going to clear that. I had something I was doing at a 4x6 earlier. So crop a little bit there, just a smidge here, and that will work. We'll say okay. So somebody said, did I make the grunge brushes? Yes, that is part of my one of the sets in the store. There's one that is grunge textures that don't have the border, the darker border, and then there's one that is grunge borders. That one is part of the set. Thank you. All right, so we've cropped this. So we're going to go into our Nik. Oh, I don't need you. I need to open the panel. And I am going to go to Viveza. And what Viveza does is let you work on the colors and brightnesses of the image. It's really great for getting some really nice color in an image. And I'm going to use control points, and that's a unique feature to Nik. And what a control point does, let me go ahead and add one. I want to darken down just this top area a little bit. So I'm going to go in here and add a control point, and this top button will let you control the size. And it doesn't necessarily just go within that circle. It will look for the tones that are consistent with the area that you placed it in. Okay. So what I want to do here is bring down the brightness, and I'm going to do that at minus just like 7%, just to bring down that brighter area a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. And do that here, and I'm going to do the same thing. And you can either use these sliders, this is the same thing, the brightness slider here, or you can use them over on the right, which is sometimes a little bit easier to see. And in this bottom area where these couple of points are, I'm going to add a different control point, and I'm going to bring down the brightness even more. I'm going to go down about there, 47%. All right, and then we're going to say OK, and bring that back to Photoshop. Now what the Nik products do is it creates its own layer. So whereas Topaz, I normally duplicate a layer just for bringing it into Topaz, with the Nik products, you don't have to do that because it will add a separate layer. So now I want to do a merged layer because I do want to add a preset in Studio. So we're going to do the Control-Alt-Shift-E, and that's Command-Option-Shift-E on a Mac. And then I am going to duplicate this. And the reason I do that, I could just do it on the merge layer, but if I go into Topaz and I come back and I've done something and I go, yeah, I really just want to delete that and start over, it's easier to just delete this duplicated layer, and then I still have my merge layer here that I could then reduplicate and try something with. just, it's kind of preventative for me. I find it easier that way. So we're going to go back into our studio. And this time we're going to add something from the Look tab, which are presets. They used to be called presets, now they're called looks. And the one that I want, the look category is Dreamy, and the one I want is called Dream Strokes. We're going to give a little bit of a painterly look. And I am going to make a change. So I'm going to apply this to open the control panel that applies that effect to this image. And then I'm going to click on the impression layer, which is what's doing this painterly effect. And I decided to change the brush stroke from this one to number 8. And it gave it a more subtle amount of impression. It was its narrower brush stroke, so it's a little bit smaller. Again, I found that just, trying the different ones, see which one I liked the look of. So we're going to accept that and go back to Photoshop. And then I decided I still wanted to tone down these 3 areas just a teeny bit. And I'm going to mark this Topaz so we know what we did. And I'm going to use the burn tool, just this little hand here. And I want the exposure lower. I want to make this a little bit smaller. And you don't want to brush a lot when you're doing burning. It's going to darken the area, but if you do too much, you start getting a gray tone to your image. You can see how that would be happening there. I just want to hit these really bright spots just a little bit and tone them down a little bit more. And then I'm going to bring in a texture, and this is also one of mine. This is from one of the Cosmos groups. This is number 33, so that's the Cosmos 3 group that this one is in, because they each have 12 textures. There's 4 groups of Cosmos. All right, I have a question, but let me get through this first. All right, so this I decided to, just so you can see, I did bring this in. I decided to flip this texture because the brighter area is kind of going at this direction, and I wanted it to match the direction of the flower. So I'm going to go into Edit, Transform, and by doing it through the Edit menu, it only flips this one layer and not the entire image. So you can see it's now kind of following the direction of that image. And I want to do, oops, I actually wanted to flip it vertically. Jeez, read my notes. So it was this area we wanted at the top. So let's go back over here and let's flip it vertically. Now we've got that following our grass. All right, and let me flip the page here. And we're going to change the blending mode to multiply and darken it a little bit. I left the opacity at 100%. What I did decide to do, and I don't often do this, we're going to do a Control-T. The brightest area was kind of right behind here, and this red was touching the edge of the flowers. I'm actually going to stretch the texture wider to bring that red away from the red of the flower. So you can manipulate textures in that way as well. And then we'll hit that. It just, I thought, gave it a little better look. And then the last thing we're going to do, I'm going to bring in one of the other grunge borders. So again, you can either do it with a brush, or this one I'll show you. I think I have the PNG file. Yep. And the PNG does have transparency on it. So we're going to rotate this and move it up here. Make it cover our image. And I want to change the color of this. I don't want to use black. I actually think I want to rotate it so this heavier area is down here. So let's do Control T again. And we're going to flip this around that way, so it's not encroaching on our grass up there. So the way we can fill this layer, I'm going to select my foreground color picker. And the color I want is number 5F472F. So I wanted a more brownish tone. I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to change the blending mode to multiply. And the opacity, 61%. It's about there, about 60%. That's actually the settings I used when I did this with the brush. So it's a little bit darker by using the actual PNG. So we could even try a different, yeah, let's go with soft light. That's more like what I wanted. And bring this down. I just wanted something kind of subtle, just to give a little edge to there. So you do have to play around. It is different if you use the brush as opposed to the PNG, and I have both in the notes. So you can play around with that. So that is that image. So that gives us a nice little painterly look to our rather ordinary little grass. All right. So let's see, we have a couple of questions. Have you moved all of your custom looks or presets from Studio One to Studio Two? I have. I do still sometimes go back to Studio One though, because sometimes I just like using the older versions of the legacy programs like Texture Effects and Impression and things more directly rather than through Studio Two. It's all a matter of personal preference. I know some people have totally switched over and some like using the old one better. I know my husband uses Studio One most of the time. And how did I bring in the textures again? And I'm just bringing them over from a second screen. So by having, if I have an image open and I wanted to bring in a texture, I'm just grabbing it from the other screen and dragging it in. If you don't have two screens, you would open both images. Let's get that out of the way. So you would have the bird and say a texture. Using the move tool, you would separate them and then just drag your texture over your image, and then you can size it from there using the handles here and just stretch it out to cover. So that would be how you would bring that in. Yeah, there's no right or wrong. I said because I have two screens, I will sometimes do that just because it's easier and faster to just drag them in while I'm testing different things. So that's why I do it that way. So let's see, one more question. I noticed the Cosmos is a smart filter. It comes in as a smart filter if I drag it in. Sometimes you do need to rasterize it if you want to change the color of it, if you're going to do the fill. Sharon, if you want to send me an email, I can give you some more info on that, or I'll actually try and put that in the blog on Thursday, because that's a good question. I know we covered that probably a couple of webinars ago, but there is a reason to not have it as a smart object sometimes. So I'll definitely answer that in more detail for you in the Thursday blog. And do you think that the old Nik is as good as the new one? Actually, when I got the email a few weeks ago about the upgrade, I was like, do I really need to upgrade the Nik? Because I don't use it all the time. But they have a new product that I thought was really cool. It is called Perspective Effects. So if you do a lot of architecture or things where you get, that perspective, yes, you can fix that in Photoshop, but this product actually seemed to do a really, really good job of that. And I like the updates that they had in some of the others as well. So I did end up upgrading it. And I do like it, and I've been trying to use it again some more because I haven't really used it a lot in the last few years. So that is that. And is there a way to get my previous webinars? Absolutely. They are on my YouTube channel. If you go to Meredith Images on YouTube, you will find my previous ones. The only one not on my channel, the fourth webinar I did in conjunction with the Maryland Photographic Group, and I can, in Thursday's blog, I'll post the link to that one again because they recorded that on their system. So it's not on my YouTube channel, but I do have the notes available for it as well. And then I give you the link for that so that you can still watch it. And thank you very much for asking. So alrighty. Okay. Dave's computer is freezing for some reason. So I'm trying to look at the chat box as well as we go along here. Alrighty, so this is going to be a quickie. I showed you this in the last webinar, and I just think it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen in the world. Skylum's Luminar 4 for sky replacement. You know, if you're trying to change the sky in an image and you've got lots of trees and things in the way, even with Mask AI, I find it has a hard time and it likes to leave halos around things. Well, this product is like, just blows my mind. So we're gonna go up to our filter menu and go to Skylum and go to Luminar 4. And let's open this one up. And my next project, I'm going to show you how to fully edit as well in here because you can do that. So this can also be a standalone product as well as a Photoshop plugin. To do the sky replacement, you're going to go to the second tab that looks like an artist palette, which is the creative tab. And then we're going to go to AI sky replacement. You can choose your skies from here. There are quite a few that come with the product. I have also added some of my own. If you scroll to the bottom, it says load custom sky image, and you could, if you have them all in one folder, you can do a whole bunch at a time. Somebody did mention to me though, when the time comes that there's an update to the program, you'd probably have to reload your own textures or skies. So make sure you keep that folder handy, don't get rid of them. So the one I'm going to use is Dramatic Sunset 3. And just like that, we have a new sky. It is absolutely amazing. It does a wonderful job. That you get no halos or anything like that. And then you can make more adjustments to it with these other settings. So we have horizon blending, which I don't need to change. The horizon position, I think I'm a little bit high right here because there's some white above the grass. So you can move the position of the horizon. Whoops, wrong way. Go the other way. Go minus like 17. And you can see it's brought down that horizon a little bit. Relighting scene, you can see it does not only replaces the sky, it relights the scene to match the sky, but you can refine that as well with the relight scene. And I did make it even a little bit more warmer. And then sky global, what that does is it makes sure that you've gotten all of the little nooks and crannies in here. So if you notice a few things that maybe aren't perfect, this is where you can tweak that as well. And I just upped that just a smidge to make sure I got all these little tiny areas in between these branches. So that's, you can adjust there. And then if we go under advanced settings, there are some other things in here if you need to adjust those. And then you can come down here to color styles, which are lookup tables. And it's basically like using a preset. And you can further change the coloring of the image. And I liked this Long Beach one. I thought it gave a little more drama to the yellows in the sky. And then the other thing I did here was go back up to the Essentials tab, which is the one that looks like a little sun. And I did add some AI structure, which is like a little bit sharpening. And I went up just a little bit on that. And details enhancer over here. I'm going to add just a smidge more detail. And I often do this in Photoshop too. When I go in to do my AI clear, I'll bump up the details a little bit. And then we do have denoise here as well. And in the luminosity, I'm going to go to about 35 and color about the same. And there we have it. And just hit apply, and that will bring you back to Photoshop. Again, this one's also one that you can use as a standalone product, and it will export it right back into Photoshop. Okay, let's see if I have a question while that's working. When I go to Luminar and try to access their objects under the augmented sky, it will not open. I'm not sure, Martha. I had an issue in the last webinar when I was in there. It was like zooming in and out all the time, and I actually emailed them, and they told me a setting to change, and it seems to have fixed that. So it might be something. Yeah, I'll see if I can find out for you on that. Email me later, Martha, and we can work on that. Topaz standalones do not open PSD files. That is correct. Topaz products, and if you saved something from Topaz Studio as a TS2 file, that would be proprietary to Studio. A PSD file is proprietary to Adobe. So no other program can open a PSD file. You should save things as a TIFF file instead of a PSD. That will keep your layers the same way a PSD is, but then a TIFF file can be opened by any other program. So Luminar, I haven't tried a PSD file, but I would expect that no, you wouldn't be able to open a PSD file there. You should just open that PSD file in Photoshop and resave it as a TIFF file, and then you can take it into any other program. So that's a great question. Alrighty, so that is our beautiful image. This is Chattanooga, the National Cemetery. We were down there last summer when we were down looking. I did some programs in Chattanooga, and then we were up here looking at property before we moved down. So we're not going to save that. All right. Oh gosh, it's 5 of already. All right, let's see if I can get through this one. I might run a few minutes over if you guys can hang in there. Won't be long. So this one I am going to open into Photoshop. This was also from the Smokies last month when we were down there. And yes, I was much closer than I should have been to this cub because he was right by the side of the road. I did have a pickup truck between him and me because his mama was there as well as his sibling. So I made sure to try and stay as safe as I could, and I was using a long lens. So we're going to do our Control J, duplicate that, and then we're going to go into our Luminar, and we're going to do the full. This is the raw file. I've done nothing to this. I just opened it in Lightroom and brought it right to Photoshop without doing anything. And sometimes when you open in here, I've noticed it takes a second for things to kind of populate. So if it looks a little weird, don't worry about it. All right. So we're going to start in the Essentials tab. Start with light. And we're going to do exposure. I'm going to see if I can. No, maybe it doesn't want to type. I was going to try and type it in, but come on. So 0.09, smart contrast about 20. And highlights I brought all the way down, and shadows I brought all the way up to open up the bear a little bit. In advanced settings, there's always more settings under almost every function here. I did bring the whites a little more down here, and then I actually brought the edge of the histogram down a little bit more. Okay, we're gonna go to AI Enhance. AI accent about 10, And again, this is all a matter of just playing. Depending on your image, it's going to be different. It's just like working in Photoshop. You just got to play around and see what all these sliders do. Color, I brought the vibrance down just a little because I thought it was a little overpowering. And then under advanced settings, I'm going to click on the yellow, and I am going to bring that luminance down to about there. And then the green, I'm going to bring that down a little bit as well. So we're trying to darken down that background a little bit. Details enhancer, I did up these just a little bit. And I brought them all to about 15 or so. And denoise, the color denoise a little bit here. And went into vignette, and you can do a vignette right here. If you want a white vignette, you would go to the right. If you want a black one, you go to the left. And that would be that. And then we're going to go to the Pro tab. And you can do dodging and burning here. It does not have a healing brush or a clone tool, but you can do some dodging and burning. The way this one works is you click on Start Painting to start the function. On the toolbar here, you're going to select your, no, not that one. You're going to select the strength, and it's 50%. You can use the bracket keys just like in Photoshop to adjust your brush size. And what I wanted to do is just lighten up the eye a little. So I'm on lighten because I want to dodge and not burn. And I just wanted to click a few times right there, just brighten up that eye area a little bit. And then I did a couple clicks just right at the tip of his nose, just to brighten that a smidge. And then click on Start Painting again to close that function. And then we're going to apply and go back to our Photoshop. We're going to do a little bit more work there. Oh, somebody said there is a healing brush. Upper right corner, second. Oh, there it is right there. Thank you. I did not notice that before. What I have noticed with Nik and with Luminar, they both have quite a few tutorials on their website to help you learn the programs. I have not watched all of them yet, but the few that I've seen, especially in the new Nik stuff, is pretty amazing. So definitely, poke around the websites because there is a lot of information available. So there's our before. That's where we started with the raw file, and that's where we are now. So we've come quite a long way. I'm going to do just a couple more things. Let's see. I did use the healing brush and try and move that grass here. That was personal preference. If you were entering this in a nature competition, you would not do that because that would be a big fat no-no. You cannot remove or add anything. But if I wanted to do it on something just for myself, you could do that. And I'm not doing a very good job right now, but trying to go quickly. And then also I was looking around in here and, some of these really big dirt spots that are on them, if you wanted to get rid of those. Again, if it were a nature shot, you definitely would not want to do that. And then I did tone down the background a little bit more. I thought it was still just a teeny bright. So I'm going to add a hue and saturation adjustment. I'm going to go into the yellows and bring the lightness down a little bit more. And then go into the greens and also bring that down. So I thought the background was just a little too overpowering. And there we have it. That would be our finished image. Yay, we got through them all, and it's only 5:01. So, somebody say, any coupon codes for any of the products? Yes, I'm going to show you one momentarily for, I do have one For Topaz and for Luminar, I did just become an affiliate for Nik as well. I do not have a separate coupon for them though. They are not offering any right at the moment. And there are some people have named some people who are good for tutorials, and I will include those as well in the Thursday blog because I do save the chat when we're done here. So let me open up my ending slide if I can find it. And let's see. And I don't think I ended up finishing one for today. So I'm going to open an old one, and I am going to, you guys are going to get, let me open the one I used last night. You're going to get an even better deal. How is that? Give me 1 second. Seminars. And this is the one I used for, I did a seminar for a Long Island group last night. So you're, instead of getting 30% off, you're going to get 50% off anything texture and brush sets in my Peacock Studio, and you can use this code, the LI Seminar 50, which is what I gave them last night. This expires Friday at midnight. I did release one new texture set today, and that is already at 50% off, so know that the coupon won't apply to that one, but that means all of my textures and brushes are half price. So jump on that while you can, because I don't do that very often. This is the link to the website, meredithimages.com/products, or you can just go to meredithimages.com and click on Peacock Studio, and that takes you to the same place. This is the Topaz affiliate link, and I will post that one as well as my new Luminar one in Thursday's blog, because like I said, I do have a code for Luminar that I got after the last webinar that you can save $10 off of Luminar as well. So thanks again, everybody. I will talk to you soon. Look for lots more details in Thursday's blog. Have a great evening or day, depending on where you are, and stay safe, everyone. Take care.